That's your necklace around here.
Oh, every minute of every day of my life. Couldn't be better. And she's here for 10 more years.
It's such a beautiful celebration.
And I was at an event, I was speaking at, but she said they recorded it, so I'll watch it later. She's.
All right, whenever you're ready. Okay.
We're going to wait 4 more minutes. I've always been very lax with the room till 4:15, but you're right.
Yeah, no, and Lisa, timing in terms of STs.
4:15. So we have time to move everyone out for services.
Great, so we're ending at 7:15. We'll keep an eye on the clock.
You have a clock. So few people have clocks anymore. Me
And
too.
behind us too.
All right.
That one I don't love because when I'm davening, it reminds me like of something good.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to see all of you here. This is sponsored by the Reimagining Retirement Group. It's in its 3rd year now. Retirement is a state of mind, it's a state of life. So you're all welcome to join us, whether you are retiring, have retired, never want to retire, but it's more how we can get the most out of the next stage of our life. I'm Lisa Latante, by the way. I'd like to thank Morris, who gets our refreshments. A couple of housekeeping things. Yes, thank you. A couple of housekeeping things. We will be finishing up at 1:15 because services, Minion, is at 7:30. We invite you to stay. And we also invite you to go out into the entry where we have coffee and tea and some nushies, and we can discuss what we've heard. So I'm delighted, and we will see you all, I guess, in September. Very excited about this topic, and it was actually one that Rabbi Michelle mentioned. She will be leading a discussion. You all know Rabbi Michelle Robinson. I don't need to give any more introduction. But I would also like to introduce Amy Schectman. She's the Saul and Gitta Kurlat CEO of Two Life Communities. She's a TE member, and she's a recognized thought leader on aging and community, and this is a new concept that I've learned from her. She's on the Governor's Housing Advisory Council in Massachusetts. She's a past president of Citizens Housing and Planning Association. She's on the boards of Massachusetts Housing Investment Corporation and the Community Builders. I think you're seeing a trend here about her and housing. She's a recipient of many, many awards, and she was recently recognized in Boston Business Journal's Power 50 list as a leader influencing their local communities for good. So I turn it over to you, and thank you.
Amy, it is such an exquisite joy to have you here with us tonight because I am often wondering and worrying about exactly the topic that is your professional expertise, because members will come to me in my office and they will say, how do I get my parent or myself into X, Y, or Z retirement living? And they often come up with troubles, and you are my go-to. And I'm so grateful to you because you are my go-to in that moment, but you also have really become our go-to here at Temple Emanuel for so many reasons, not least of which is that you are our own beloved Rav Chazan Eliza Berger's mother-in-law.
The best.
And Eder's grandmother. And that actually means that you really know what it is to live life in community and in this community. You had just a spectacular opening question that you wanted to begin by starting here, for not to start with your questions to Amy, but actually Amy's questions for you. So I want to facilitate you asking that opening question.
And may I start by saying my dream is to be as effective. I took Michelle's Torah class last year. She's the best teacher I've ever had, so may I be half as good as that. So I am talking with Lisa and Michelle in advance. I prepared like 7 different directions I could go. I've prepared a lot because I'm pretty passionate about this topic. And I want to make sure I'm going where you are. So could a few people tell me, what are your dreams, your hopes, your fears about aging in community, senior living? What are you most concerned about or interested in, so that I make sure I really respond to what you want to hear? Just one word, when. When is a brilliant question.
I'm concerned as I get older that, my friends will start to leave either town or leave permanently, and, be lonely. So I think that's a big thing of running out of friends.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, I'm interested in what the financial model is for these homes.
And can I just ask, when you say financial model, financial as it will affect the person moving in, or as I raise from the, okay.
How much does he need to save?
Yeah.
I'm interested in space. Most of the places I've seen are kind of small, like 600 feet, and they kind of small. Especially if you do, especially if you're involved in stuff that you need.
Availability. I've heard that some have 6 to 8 year waiting periods.
Which really relates to that when question, doesn't it?
I'm concerned with transportation. As we get older, being able to visit people at whatever facility they're at is more difficult, and it would be wonderful to have some arrangement or something in place so that one could easily, or as a group, visit like Hebrew Senior Life or other places that are all right.
Wow.
Excuse me.
I have questions regarding my parents. Oh, okay. I have questions regarding my parents who are in their late 90s, living independently, but how do you determine when it's time to be more
That's the when question, yeah.
more forceful, or to say it's time? And that was my main question, and also the different levels of care I'm interested in.
It might have been alluded to already, but I'm thinking about location, because we've spent a lifetime developing so many doctors and friends and neighbors and community, and shul.
Most important.
Amen.
Yeah, I would feel terrible being very, very far away and having a difficult time getting back here.
Absolutely.
Amen.
A lot of our communities, right?
Bonnie, I'll pay you later.
Do you have any insight into whether to go into one of these facilities or age in place and have, home health aides if your health goes bad?
Very strong.
Paul, do you still have a question? Okay.
A fellow gave me this brochure, Family Tree Adult Foster Care. Get paid up to $1,700 per month. I'm curious about something like this, having had to deal with a parent who was not well.
I might not know about that. Okay.
Yep.
Paul? Okay. This might be beyond the scope.
I think, for me anyway, a big priority is affordability.
I'm wondering why the women greatly outnumber the men. I wonder if that's.
I think, I actually would love to start where Paul just ended here. So, so Amy, let's talk about senior living and what that does for longevity, what that does for social connection.
So thank you, and I love that question. And the reason in general that's true is in Massachusetts, life expectancy, right, the average, 79 for men, 81 for women, so women live longer. Now, I want to say that that is extremely skewed by income. So the reason that's an average is usually people who are wealthier live much longer, people who are less wealthy live much shorter. Now, the reason, this is a really fun question for me, is, and we are going to talk, I think, about our affordable housing, but also our middle income housing. But right now, before we open our middle income, our portfolio is an extremely low income population. The median annual household income of the people that live with us is $14,000 a year. So we're talking about, so you would expect life expectancy to be very much lower than the average for the state. But in fact, for men and women both, it's the same, and it's 87 if you live it to life. That is, I mean, I don't know about you, if my mother of blessed memory had another 15 years, I would have been really, really happy. So that's, and if I can pick up a little bit on why that is, so you talked about loneliness, you talked about affordability. The two biggest challenges to aging optimally are loneliness and affordability. Those are the two biggest challenges. These challenges are not only hard, they actually affect health, they affect length, quality of life, quantity of life. And so the one place that can address those two challenges simultaneously, the only time you can address simultaneously, is in a senior living community where you can share services, where you can have overhead that spreads the cost of those home health aides and the care, and where we can, through density, provide affordability. Now, some of the time we provide affordability through government subsidy if you're income qualified, but we are in the process of developing the first in the country middle income retirement community, and I'll just digress for 1 second. In the field of senior living, there's affordable housing, which is subsidized by the government, and if you earn more than, it changes every year, the amount, but let's say $50,000 a year, just, if you earn 10 cents a month more than that, we can't touch you. We cannot serve you, we cannot talk to you, and we get audited every year. And if I were to make a little exception for you, it's 10 cents a month, when I got audited, I'd be risking losing $41 million a year in subsidies for the other 2,000 people. It's not something we're gonna do. Then there's the marketplace. And the marketplace is for people who are in the top 3% of income, very wealthy, very expensive. And there's a whole huge group of us in the middle, people like me, spent my whole career in nonprofits, did fine. Wonderful daughter-in-law, sent my kids to college, all the right things. I have a great life, but I didn't accumulate massive amounts of wealth. And there's a lot of people like me. So we're developing the first one, and I'll quickly finish, Michelle, because I know I don't want to answer each question with 20 minutes. When I was determined to do this for the middle, and I thought, like, what inspiration can I draw on? Because first I just looked at, well, if we just do what we do for subsidized housing, and we did it and charged privately, great. It turns out that's why it's so expensive elsewhere. And then I was like, where do I find inspiration? Well, in the 30s and the 40s, when people were moving to then Palestine, and there were a lot of people, and then particularly after the war, who had lots of skills and brains, but not a lot of capital. Well, there was a kibbutz movement, right? And kibbutzim really monetized the value of the wisdom. So in Opus, which is what our middle income community, everyone who's moving in has signed a contract to volunteer at least 10 hours a month. And through that, we reduce overhead, we reduce staffing costs, and address the loneliness and address the affordability simultaneously. And I can talk more about either side of that
Yeah, I wanted to pause us for just sort of a definition of terms of senior living. I feel like there's just a mishmash of what does it mean, what can it mean. There are some places that say, you know, you come in and you're in independent living, and then you move to assisted, and then you can move to nursing homes. There are other places where only one of those options. Can you both define our terms and then share with us what your thinking on that is?
I love that question, and I'm going to define the terms, and then I'm going to tell you all of the terms are in flux, and the industry is in flux, and we're starting to redefine all of that. The traditional three-part system is called independent living, and that's Golda Meir house. Oh, that is what you know is where you have an apartment, and you cook your own meals, although maybe we provide some meals, and you live your life. However, I think the word independent is just the stupidest word, because I'm not independent. If my friends all disappeared, I wouldn't be okay. I live for my friends, for the shul, but okay, sorry, I digress. Independent, so you live in your own apartment, and you provide basically for yourself. Then there's something called assisted living, which I have to tell you, in Massachusetts is regulated in a way it isn't regulated in anywhere else in the country. And assisted living, the concept is if you need some help, but not all the time. Maybe you need help getting dressed in the morning. Maybe they'll provide meals for you so you don't have to cook your own meals. But it's not intended for someone who needs care all the time, but some of the time. Now, in Massachusetts, with a very small exception, I think 1% of the apartments, very small exception, it's in the private market, and it's very expensive. In Massachusetts, it's around $8,000-9,000 a month per person. Wow. So it's very expensive. But the reason I mention the regulations, it's very significant in Massachusetts. They are not allowed to provide more care than, I think it's 45 minutes a day, without charging you separately for it. And that was the nursing home lobby won that battle. It's not true in New York, it's not true in New Hampshire, it's not true in Connecticut, and I don't think it's true in any other state. So that's just what assisted living is. Then there's nursing home care, sometimes called long-term care, and it's 24-hour coverage. You're usually not in an apartment at all. In independent living, you're in an apartment. It has a kitchen, it has a private bathroom, it has everything an apartment does. In assisted living, typically you have a small apartment-like, but it's not, usually you don't have a kitchen. You might have a microwave, but you don't have a full kitchen. You usually have a private bath, not all, but nursing home now, often you're sharing a room, and you may or may not have access to a private bathroom, and there are nurses 24/7. And so it's meant for someone who really needs oxygen 24/7. Okay, so those are the three. And then there's something called the continuing care retirement community, which is what you mentioned, which is, it has all three on the same campus. Now, it's all in flux because even before COVID, and extremely more before COVID, after COVID, 90% of Americans said, given the choice to end their life in a nursing home or die 2 years early, 90% of people said, die 2 years early.
Wow.
That was before COVID. Now, they haven't done it again. I would bet any amount of money that it's even more. So what we find is people fear that end of life scenario. So we, for example, have been saying, okay, so how do we not make that happen? What can we do in our apartments? And I'm proud to say that at 2 Life, for example, we have now gotten down to fewer than 2% of our residents actually end up going to a nursing home for the end of their life. We are able to provide almost all of the services that people need in their apartment, which is a much happier. And in fact, I'm not just saying that. We had BC, Boston College, there's something called the Center for Retirement Studies, and they independently evaluated us versus they took the same person who's living in their home with home health aides, at the same level of income, the same level of acuity, in other words, how many services they need. And they said, wow, 2% of your folks are going, if they were in their own homes, 5.9% of them would have been going to nursing homes. And if you do lose someone to a nursing home, you're losing them after age 87, whereas if they live at home, it's more likely to be between 80 and 84. So really changes that. So those are the thing. And at Opus, we made the decision that we would have everything. We're not having a separate independent assisted living and nursing home, but rather we are committed to providing care in people's homes so that they can stay. Somebody mentioned, I don't want to leave my shul. I don't want to. If you've been living in this apartment and then something happens to you, you don't want to be moved. You want the facilities and the services to move to you. And that's what we're doing across the board in all our communities. And I'm a very big believer in housing is a platform where it's more efficient and it's more possible to provide those services. But someone has a question.
Yeah, if you,
Do you have any difference in the occurrence of things like strokes or heart attacks?
I do.
Do you have any differences in the occurrence of things
well,
like strokes
so-
or heart attacks? Right.
Yes, so I don't have that for just us, but I have the studies that have been done. And in fact, aging in communities, being surrounded by other people, 29% fewer heart attacks, 32% fewer strokes, and get this, 100% less dementia. The incidence of dementia is 1/2 if you are in lonely versus not lonely. 100% difference. So these are very dramatic. The other thing is it also, what are called activities of daily living, which is the measure of what you can do. Do you need help with dressing? Do you need help with cooking? It turns out loneliness actually accelerates the process by which you lose ADL's abilities to do that. And it turns out loneliness impedes the functioning of your immune system. So you're also going to just get flu and cold and things much greater rate than if you're not lonely.
Now, can I just ask, so what's the difference then between moving to a senior housing place where I would be living in my own apartment type of a place, but having the services of others versus living in a condo anywhere or living in a lovely community where we share a common room? What are the differences? Why would I maybe consider making the move to senior living?
So it's a really good question. And I would love to say it's always the same answer, but I think it depends what the senior living community is. Now, our communities have an intentionality around creating and nurturing community life. So someone asked about space. So there's the space in the apartments, but for us, what's much more important is the space in the common area. And what's even more important than the space in the common area is the staffing that build the common area. Now, I'm going to explain our model, and I think if you're looking at any other place, this is the question, do you have this model? And our model is twofold. So we say there are individuals and there are communities. So we have what we call resident service coordinators. I hate that name. Judy's going to come up with a better name. It's not a good name, but it's the name. Resident service coordinators at a rate of 1 to 100 are individually focused. Lori, did you just have a bad experience? Let me help you sort that out. Oh, Judy, did you need to be on food stamps? I'm going to make sure. Oh, Bonnie, et cetera. It's a very individually. We're going to every year do an assessment. What do you want? What are your dreams? What are your hopes? What are the impediments? You're not on food stamps? I'm going to get you on food stamps. You're not on blah, blah. I don't have to explain. Or, oh, your daughter moved to California and you're afraid to fly. Let's sit and talk that through. So it's a very individual thing so that you get the support you need. The other part of our service model, and I don't like this title either, you can see I have no influence as the CEO, is called Group Services Coordinators. Their job is to create so many different options for activities and programs that everyone finds their way into community. Might be lifelong learning for you. You might prefer an art class. You might enjoy the music more. You might want to be a fitness nut. You might want to do an intergenerational program, etc. It's not, we must have so many different kinds of ways so that everyone can find their way into community. Now, the GSCs and RSC obviously work hand in glove because they say, oh, Lisa came to me today, she's really feeling quite lonely, but what she really loves is classes on Torah. Is there anything we can do? And then the GSC is going to guess, oh, Rabbi Julia, our rabbi, is going to create a class on Torah for you. So those two things to me are critical. The third element, and I would say if you're looking at any senior living, you want to be asking this question too. How is the maintenance team related to the social services team? Because the maintenance folks are eyes and ears. If I go in to replace your faucet's leaking, oh my goodness, your faucet's leaking. Well, you've got 6 weeks of dirty dishes there, crumbs on the counter. Well, I'm going to say, that's not like Michelle. I'm going to call the resident service coordinator, who's a social worker, and we're going to see, do you need a little more support than we realized? So the maintenance team every week meets with the social services team and says, did you notice anything that's troubling? Should we be watching for anything? So that integrated team that all says we live in community, we care about everyone in this community, and all of us are about addressing what's in that community. Those pieces are very different than if you live in a condo. You could live in a condo and never know your neighbors. Now, I mean, like a lovely example is Golda. We have some folks from Golda here. I hear this story every week. Myra, I noticed Bonnie's newspaper, the New York Times, it's 3 in the afternoon. Now, Bonnie reads that newspaper by 9 a.m. and it's still on her porch. Can you go find out if something's wrong with Bonnie? Now, in fact, something as simple as that, they're probably going to call Bonnie and see. But the way residents support each other are another set of eyes and ears, and everyone is about all of us. And we did this survey, and I promise I'll finish this question. I know I talk too much.
Not at all. This is
We
super
did this
helpful.
survey of our residents. It was a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember this. And we asked people, would you recommend living with Two Life to your sister or best friend? Because we wanted a really honest answer. And 90% rate on a scale of 1 to 10, how strongly? And 90% said 8, 9, or 10. So then we dug deeper. Well, why? Why do you like us so much? And the answer was this. All of the staff people, they know my name. They understand my situation. And by that, I have a child in the area. I have no relatives at all, whatever. And the third, and this is my favorite, is this: everyone believes in my goals for myself. To me, that's the definition of dignity. And the entire purpose of the team is to empower you to get your goals for yourself. No condo association is doing that. I wish I could tell you all senior living does it, but I actually did make some like checklist kind of questions about what you might answer, but that's off the top of my head.
Okay,
This
I
woman's
want
been
to
trying
share.
answer.
Oh, yeah, Lisa.
What you've just been talking about sounds to me like focus, because my mother until recently was at Coleman House, so I'm a little familiar with it, just watching it grow outside of it. So I've heard things about it, and so I use, because it doesn't sound like Coleman House, what you're describing, which is what you're describing does not sound like Coleman House, which is independent living. My mother found there weren't a lot of activities that she was interested in. Yes. She was a college graduate, and a lot of stuff was religious oriented or things like that. And maybe it's just her problem, but
So, no, Lisa, that speaks to the question of fit and match and that checklist, Amy, that you have for us.
well, I mean,
of
there
what
weren't
we
any
might
other
wanna look
choices for her financial resources at that time, and she was there a long time. But anyway, Nadina doesn't know that, but she just went into a nursing home. But anyway, I'll tell that. But so it sounds to me more like what I hear is going to be happening at Opus, with a lot of activities,
and that kind of thing. I mean, they don't have at Coleman House, those two people you were talking about that are always coming over and talking to you and seeing how you're doing and what can we do to get you excited. So I think it's important for you to differentiate between a place like Opus and a place like Coleman House. Now, Coleman House is like subsidized housing for a lot of people. So there might be independent living where it's more expensive and they do more things. There might be different kinds of independent.
Right, so actually, Lisa, I want to take that comment and use it to think about the checklist, and then I'm so interested in, so first question is about the checklist.
Okay, I gotta
Second
find that.
question
Yeah.
that I have here is actually about that beautiful newspaper story, combined with kind of a sense that I hear from some people of like, but I'm going to move in and there's going to be a bunch of mean girls, whether literally mean girls or mean men, but that kind of phenomenon, do you see that? How is that dealt with there? And which maybe plays into your checklist. Yeah. And then I want to use that to pivot off of eventually to answer the question of when. And I want you to tell your bridge club story.
Okay. So I would like to talk to you afterwards a little bit because I was just at Coleman yesterday, actually, and there were 6 activities happening yesterday. And you say the college grad, we have something called Coleman College. Every Wednesday from 10 to 4, there are classes all day taught by college professors. So
she's 100 now, so
okay, so
just for those who are joining us on recording, she's now 100, so.
I'd say from 85 on, there was less and less she's interested in, and nobody ever, it's not like a place where nobody could come to her apartment and say, I'm gonna get you up and going.
Well, so Lisa's pulling in, actually, I think something really helpful for this, because what she just said, for those of you who are listening digitally, is that from 85 on, there were fewer and fewer activities and fewer people who were interested in pulling to those activities. And you told me a very sweet story that would address kind of what can happen.
Yeah.
To be fair, a lot of people do like being at Coleman House. It's not all bad. It's just, there's things that aren't perfect about these places.
Well, okay.
Probably about the world and life, too.
Did you want to say anything before I answer that?
I just wanted to say,
Judy, into the microphone.
I just wanted to say, there's 24-hour coverage. You have people at night. You also have a pull cord in your apartment. If it doesn't work, or if your faucet or anything doesn't work, you pull the pull cord, and if somebody's there during the day, they will come up.
And at night, someone's there.
And at night, there's somebody on call.
24/7. Yeah. Thank you for. Yes, and all of them. That's a standard. I'd like to learn more. So
let's get back to your checklist and your story.
Okay, the check. So we'll start with the story because it's the when story. Okay, and what I would say is as soon as you can possibly do it, because the relationships you build are very powerful. The one she's referring to is early in my tenure, I was at Golda Meir House, and there's a lunch program there, and they had announced that I was the CEO with great fanfare and, did the whole thing. And so I went to every table to chat with people, and I sat down at one table, and a woman, let's call her Michelle. Michelle says to me, "Hi, I'm Michelle. Who are you?" And I said, I'm Amy Schectman. I'm the new CEO here. "Oh, great. Do you live here?" "No, I'm the CEO." "Oh, my name's Michelle. Who are you?" And after the 4th time, in 5 minutes, we went through that exchange. Being quite a brilliant diagnostician, I realized probably is somewhere on the memory loss spectrum. 3 minutes later, 3 other women come running up and say, "Michelle, come on, it's time for Bridge Club." Oh my God, Michelle got so excited. It's Bridge Club, and she gathers her stuff and she runs off, and I'm puzzling. I'm thinking, I don't think she can play Go Fish right now, but bridge is really hard. And don't keep my mouth shut. And later I saw Judy, and I say, "Judy, is Michelle a really good bridge player?" And Michelle can't play bridge. And then she went like this. Do you think we'd kick her out of the bridge club just because she can't play bridge? Who do you think we are? And she said, we sit around and we have raisinets on the table and we deal the cards and we talk and we talk, and Michelle doesn't quite realize we're not playing bridge, but she feels very gratified that she's still in the bridge club. And what we do is Monday 2 to 4 every week, we have that bridge club, but we really want to play bridge. So we've created another one on Tuesdays. She doesn't know about, doesn't hurt her feelings. If Michelle had waited to come in now, and we welcome people at all stages, no one would invite her to bridge club, nor would I expect them to. But if you build those relationships, people will stay with you forever and be supportive. You don't have to worry about some of your friends disappearing because there's always new friends to meet. And it's a very powerful, it trickles up and down. One other quick story, which actually was at Coleman House, so we'll see how that resonates, but we just did a complete modernization. And when you do a modernization, you have to keep a whole stack of units vacant because the electrical and plumbing goes vertically. So normally we welcome 2 or 3 people a month, right? Because we don't turn over units very often. But now, suddenly, we were going to bring in like 43 people. And the residents got together and they met with our director and said, we're terrified. What are you terrified of? We're terrified that with so many new people coming in, someone could fall through the cracks. What can we do? So here's a list of 43 of our current residents. Will you please match each one of us up so the first day the new person comes in, I shouldn't worry that somebody could fall through the cracks. Now that's aging in community, and that is what happens when people learn to care about each other and to be supportive of each other. And it's a very powerful thing. So you asked for my checklist. So I want to think more and do a more formal one, but in preparation for tonight, the first thing is who owns it? And you can question me and argue with me, but I think if it's a nonprofit, it's a very different experience. I would even go as far as to say a Jewish-sponsored nonprofit or any faith-based, really, nonprofit, I have to say, is going to be different. We don't make any money. Every surplus dollar that we generate from government subsidies goes into more programs and services. It doesn't unfortunately go into my pocket or anything. The second is, and I wanted to get to someone's question about financial. How are the fees calculated? You should ask that. How do you determine how much rent someone should pay? What are the fees? How do you figure that out? And I mean, for us, we charge only what we need to run, and we don't expect people to pay more so that we provide those services. We use philanthropy or government money for that. How are the fees calculated? And how have they changed? I want to, in every 5 years for the last 5 years, what were they 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago? You want to see how sensitive they are to changing. I would say, I really encourage you, if you're looking at any senior housing, how did you do during COVID? How many people died? Because I think we all remember older adults were extremely vulnerable. Now, at that time, the average age in our portfolio was 82. We had 1,600 residents, and not one contracted COVID at 2 Life and died. We did lose 16 residents, but all 16 of them died, went to the hospital for a heart attack, something else, and got COVID in the hospital. Nothing we could do about. So you want to know about, we tracked it very, very, very carefully. So you want to know what happens if this is not subsidized housing? What happens when you run out of money? How do they take care of that? If you need home care, you mentioned, do they help you or are you on your own? And how do they help you? Do they have, okay, I'm going to finish the checklist, then I can.
I just wanted, could you just define home care, please?
Okay, so home care is, and I'm really glad you said that because I always forget. Home care is different than health care. So if you need help cooking meals, cleaning your apartment, maybe showering, personal care, things, if you need wound care or, heart CPR, that is not home care. Home care is provided by usually nurses' assistants or trained home care workers, but it's personal care. By the way, 70% of baby boomers will need significant home care in their lives. So just remember that, that's important. Do they have anyone on staff who helps with case management? If you find out you just got kicked off of Medicaid or Medicare, do they have anyone that's there to help you with that, or are you on your own? How do they expect to adjust to your changing needs? Okay, so for example, all of our apartments are adaptable. If you suddenly need to use a wheelchair or a walker, we don't move you to a different unit. We move the cabinetry in your unit so you can slide under the sink. So we make sure every bathroom has the turning radius and every kitchen has the turning radius. So we adjust the apartment to you. You want to ask that question. Do you expect us to move, or do you expect to move the stuff? What is their mission statement, and 3 examples of how they implement their mission statement, and what are their own internal measures of success. That's what I came up with for today. I will do a better job. That was just my first cut in preparing for tonight, but I'll prepare something and get it to Lisa so that you can all have something more formal than that.
Okay, so let's say that people here are swayed. Here's the challenge, right? And you've said when is now, like as soon as you can, and we're sold on that message. And now to Sue's question, right? All right, so I'm ready, right? How do I get there? How do I convince my parents that they want to go there? And how do I get off of that waiting list? Is there a hack for me?
So there is a little bit of a hack, but it's hard. I mean, I will say at the moment our waiting list is 9,743 households for our portfolio, which turns over at a rate of about 160 a year. So it's very long. Now, that said, what I'm talking about, those are the subsidized apartments, and those are particularly a certain kind of subsidy. I won't bore you with all the different kinds of subsidies that we have to administer, but the best kind is what's called either Section 8, RMRP, or Section 202. But what it means is people pay 1/3 of their income in rent, and the government pays us the difference of what it takes to run the building. Most of our units, 93% of our units, are that kind of subsidy. That's where there's the longest waiting list. We also have in Golda Meir House, in Shillman House, in Brown House, some market apartments that we actually cross-sub. We don't actually charge market rents, but those have much shorter waiting lists simply because it just feels so bad to have long waiting lists, so we don't advertise them. People who hear about them can come, and so we just don't have as long waiting lists. And the rent at Golda, I think, is like $1,800 a month, and that includes all your utilities, and so it's way lower than, that's what we call
That's market rate?
Yeah, that's what we call market. Which, again, we're only charging what we need to keep the heat and hot water on. We're not using some places use the market rate units to subsidize, cross-subsidize. We don't choose to do that. We choose to only charge what we need to charge. So and then there's another level called tax credit, which if you have an income about 40 to 50,000, then you pay a fixed rent, and there's not quite as long a waiting list for that. Now, I also want to talk for a minute about Opus. So Opus is our first middle income development. We're opening in September. We are fully sold out in advance, and there is a waiting list there. Now, Michelle often asks, like, what do I do? I got to help this person. The one trick I will say is we have 12 different unit types, and if you say, I will take whatever unit opens first, you will go much faster on the waiting list. And I tell everyone, this is not like, I'm not doing anything illegal or unethical. Many people get very tied to, I want the bedroom to be on that corner, and and I understand that. And if you want to be picky, you'll just wait longer. But so Opus will open, and we were very surprised. We thought it would take about 2 years, 2.5 years we had budgeted to market Opus, since no one's ever done it before. We thought middle income folks often aren't looking because they figure, I can't afford what's in the market, so why should I, cause all that trauma to myself? And then we sold out in 8 months. And if I can tell one story about that, we did focus groups. And okay, I will admit, so when I first suggested that volunteering be a requirement, like a kibbutz, there wasn't a single person who said anything nice to me. Everyone's like, are you lost your mind? That's stupid, that's ridiculous. Why would people pay market rent and have to volunteer? That's just dopey. And I said, well, let's test it. So we did focus groups. This is my first time you're behind a mirror that it looks like a mirror to them, but you can see, but you can't talk. And we asked, after lots of questions, if there were a requirement to volunteer, do you think it should be 2 hours a month, 5 hours a month, or 10 hours a month? 83% of people said 10 hours a month. Well, I was floored. Why would you say that? That doesn't make any sense. So I wasn't allowed to talk, but afterwards I was allowed to go in, and I just said, I've got to ask, why would you pick the highest requirement? That doesn't even make sense. And there were 2 answers I just love. One woman said, this will be the last move I make in my life. And, I don't want to get back to your Mean Girls. What happens if people don't like me? What happens if I don't like these other people? I'm really scared about that. If I know everyone has signed up to volunteer at least 10 hours a month, I'm going to find people that like me. So I thought that was a really interesting concept. And then this other guy, my little guy, he said, I'm lonely. My wife died 5 years ago, and I'm lonely, and I'm also shy. And I've been to some of these presentations, and they say, you can sit at any table you want for dinner, and everyone will be so happy to see you. I cannot go and sit at a table. I can't do that. But, he said, I was a librarian. And I'm going to volunteer 10 hours a week in the library. And people are going to come, and I'm going to say, Lisa, can I recommend a book? And you're going to say, okay. And then I'm going to say, tell me some of the books you've liked. And then I'm going to recommend the best book you've ever read. And you're going to love it. And you're going to come back. And I'm going to say, can I recommend another book? And you're going to say, yes, that was good. And then we're going to talk again. And then you're going to invite me to sit at your table. And I will. I just love that concept. So, did I answer the question? Oh, and the Mean Girls.
Mean Girls.
I want to get to the Mean Girls. So, I cannot, and then I know I'm not going to promise if you come to a senior life, that you come to any senior life community or to life. I'm not going to promise no one is ever going to say a nasty thing. I'm not going to promise that everyone's kind. I will tell you, and I won't say which campus, we did have a problem. There were 3 women who sat in the lobby. Dave, why are you wearing a gray shirt? Gray shirt isn't a good thing. Bonnie, stripes, they don't flatter you, And they would say mean things. And we had a social worker talk with them about the impact of their behavior. And I have to tell you, the next day he was wearing a red shirt, and they wanted to know why he was wearing it. So it didn't work. And what we ultimately did, and this was controversial, but we made the decision to do this, we actually wrote a letter that it was a lease violation to have behavior that impeded the ability of other people to enjoy the community. And it was a really extreme thing to do, and it stopped.
Wow.
So
They're still learning, even in senior community. Beautiful.
So I can't tell you we can always prevent someone from saying something mean to another person. I can tell you that if it comes to our attention, and it most often comes to our attention, we are going to aggressively address it. And I have to tell you, I've been there 15 years now, and we have 7 campuses. That happened once. So again, it can. I don't want to pretend it's always perfect, but if you have an intentionality about building and nurturing community flourishes.
And that sounds like one of the things to put on our checklist, to ask at the facility what they do when these instances come up. Have they had it happen? How have they responded? Please, Lori.
I'm just really confused. Is Opus the same as, is it True Life?
True Life is the sponsor of Opus, so we're owning and we're building Opus. The difference for us is the most of our portfolio, except for the market units at Golda and Schulman and Brown, which is the minority of units, are subsidized and therefore only available to people whose income does not go over a certain amount of government set. Opus is our first market product, and that is aimed at people who fall in the middle. And should I answer about the financial?
Yeah, I would love to pivot. I would love to pivot to a deep dive on finances and how one actually, you keep talking about earnings per month, but people are most often retired. Like, how do we make sense of that?
Okay.
I just wanted to have a question about Opus, because I went there. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes. Much better.
Sorry. I went to Opus when at first they were marketing and opening and all that kind of stuff, and left 1,000% more confused than I went in because, you know,
I wasn't there.
No, and it was a very slick marketing thing. It really was well done, but they didn't talk about rent or anything like that. It was some kind of buy-in.
Yeah.
Where you bought into units but you never owned them.
Correct.
Let's dive into that. So this is the deep dive on finances. How does this model work?
Okay, so this model, the way we did it, in the focus groups, remember I mentioned we had these focus groups, what we found is people in the middle were not afraid of a one-time upfront payment because for the most part, older adults own their own homes and they know what their home is worth. And so the idea of an upfront payment as a percentage of their, which is typically, we've scaled them to be 30 to 50% of the market in Needham, Newton, and Brookline, our target market. They weren't afraid of that. Terrified of a monthly fee that could grow and that as they become fixed income, what happens? So what we did is we said, okay, what we're going to do is have a program where people sell their homes, give an upfront fee, we call it a community share. You could call it.
Like the kibbutz.
Like the kibbutz. This is all my dream to live on a kibbutz. Community share. When the person leaves us, which for the most part will be when they pass away, 80% of that can be restored to their family. Or if they decide to leave, because they decide to leave, which won't happen, but then 80%, they get 80%. But what we did is we scaled that so that it would be 30 to 50% of the market, but also so that we could collect enough, and that's why we have 12 different unit sizes with different community shares, that upon move-in, we will be able to pay off 100% of the construction debt. We will not be carrying construction debt through. We will have a small mortgage, but that will allow us to charge very low monthly fees. And we make a commitment that we will share with the community our own costs, so we will never raise rents more than inflation that we will, not inflation in general, inflation in our costs, and that we pretty much said it will never really be more than 3% a year. unless like something crazy extraordinary happens, and everyone in the community will be aware of that. So we kept monthly fees to a very, very small amount, and I can, if you want to talk about what they are, I can quote them, but so the idea, now because there are 12 different unit sizes, there are different community shares and different monthly fees, and that is very explicitly so that someone who has a little less money, someone who has a little more money, can still live in this community space. And there are 31,000 square feet of community. There's a whole community center, so there's a huge amount that everyone enjoys equally. No one knows who's in what unit and what they paid. And that monthly fee includes all the utilities as well as about 20 meals a month. So it's a very robust program that people get. And you don't pay insurance, you don't pay, I mean, you can have renter's insurance, but you don't pay real estate taxes, you don't pay mowing or, whatever. That's it. That's covers all the fees of everything we do. Now, the other thing we did that other people don't do is that community share that you give to us, we hold that so that if at some point you need so much home care that you didn't anticipate it would cost so much, or whatever, something happens that you couldn't control, you can borrow back against that, so that if you need help with home care, you can use that money to up to the 80% to pay for your own home care. And one more word about home care, and then I promise I'll stop talking. A really important thing to consider, remember I mentioned 70% of baby boomers will need significant home care. If you live in a private home or a condo that you talked about, the only way you can hire home care is, right now, it's a 4-hour minimum. And that's because there's a shortage in home care workers. So they won't let you, and I learned this with my own mother of blessed memory. I needed to have her help just in the morning, just to get ready, dressed, that's all. And I had to pay for 4 hours of care. And then at some point she needed a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour at night, and I paid for 8 hours of care. Well, it's a minimum of $35 an hour. It is what croaks middle-class people. So what we're doing at Opus is we're having home care on the campus. So we can't subsidize it because that would make fees too high. What we can do is say, you can hire a half an hour, so that as your needs grow, you pay more, but you don't pay for what you don't need. And that is going to, doesn't save us money per se, it saves the people who move in. It changes the financial projections for them.
Wow. Okay, so if you'll give Nate the microphone, and please.
Well, I'm curious what the breakdown is in your portfolio, let's say, of people who are fully retired as opposed to people who are partially retired or continuing to work while they're living within the community.
It's a really good question. So it actually changes from community to community depending on the year it was built and when people moved in. At a place like Golda, I think the vast majority are retired. Am I right? I'm pretty sure. And at Coleman, I think the vast majority are retired. We just opened a place in Waltham, and so about a third of the people there are still working, more often than not part-time, but engaged in the workforce. At our new building in J.J. Carroll, which is in Brighton, we have about 25% of those folks are working. At Shirley Meadows, almost no one is working any longer. At Brown, there's a small, I would say about 10% of Brown House is people working. So overall, it's a small percentage. Given that the average age is 82, it tends to be, people tend to be retired, but not everyone is retired.
So what does it mean when you say their income, then, for that 75%?
Okay.
You're calculating income in terms of determining how much they pay.
Okay, so this is where it gets really complicated. I'm going to try and simplify it. If you're in a unit where it's 30% of your income, the government determines what income is, and it's really income. when you go to this tax credit units, which is the next increment up, they count any assets you have as 0.2%. So they take, say you had $1 million in assets, they're going to count $2,000 towards your income that year when they do that. And then for market rate people, we don't actually calculate, that's people's income. So assets factor in, but in a very, very minor way.
So you hear people talking about spend down? Can you share with us,
Yes.
should that be a strategy people use, or are there other options?
Spend down is very important, and it's a strategy around healthcare. It's not around housing. Housing is neutral to your spend down, other than this 0.2%. It's pretty irrelevant. Now, if you need long-term care, and everyone should be really clear about this, Medicare does not pay for home care. It does not pay for nursing homes. People think it does not. The only insurance, and Blue Cross Blue Shield doesn't, and Tufts Health Plan, these places do not pay for home care. Medicaid, which is for people who are of lower income, does pay for home care, and it does pay for long-term care. To be in Medicaid, I think it's now $2,000 is the maximum amount of assets you can have. So Assets.
Wow.
Assets. Your income has to be $14,000 or below, and you're not allowed to have any assets. And they do a 5-year look back. So you can't say, all right, I'll go on Medicaid next year, I'll just give my children all my money, I'll have no money, but my children will take care of me. They do a 5-year look back. So spending down is a strategy to get home care and a strategy to get long-term care. Wait, I had one other point. Oh, the interesting thing is, and this is important for people to know, with Medicaid, you can apply to be on Medicaid before you spend all your assets down, and it is actually wise to do so. So if you are approaching time where you think you might really need long-term care, you can apply for Medicaid while you still have assets, and they mark your file waiting for spend down. So I don't know what I don't know the words they use, but then you are in the system. And when your assets are depleted, then it's like, oh, okay, check, you met that criteria and you can go on to Medicaid. People don't know that, and it's important that you do apply as soon as you think you might. But if you have $1 million in assets, there's really no way in 5 years you're going to get down to that spend down.
So just a minute then, pivoting on the being able to think long-term. What if we say we want to go on one of those lists, but I'm relatively young, I want to do not just the Medicaid spend down, but I want to think through in 5 years. I've heard I need to sign up in 5 years. In 5 years, I want to go into one of these places. I'm going to join the list.
Yeah.
And then like tomorrow they call and they say, Mazel Tov, right? What does one do?
So you take the unit and you move in. Now that's a slick answer.
Is that the only answer?
No, but
Okay.
in our government subsidized units, we are required that if you say no twice, you have to reapply. We have to take you off the list and you have to reapply. And that makes, it's actually a fair rule, because otherwise the amount of work we have to do to keep people on lists. We made the decision therefore at Opus to have the same rule, just so that it was a universal rule. So you do have 2 chances to say no before, you go down on the list.
To the bottom.
Yeah. But if you come up again and you say no twice, we have to say you're no longer on the list. So I think it's really unwise. I've been at 2 Life 15 years. We have 1,965 residents and just under 2,000 residents. And once in all that time, someone said, "Oh, boy, I made a mistake," and left. Every other time, almost every single person says, "I wish I had done this sooner. I wish I had invested in community sooner because the rewards are," and there are just so many things that people grow from each other and learn from each other. Actually, Temple Emanuel helped us out with one thing, which I just loved. It actually started at Coleman House. We have one rabbi, Rabbi Julia, and she goes around to all the places, and she was our rabbinic intern, and she said, "Do you remember this?" She said, "I'm talking to a lot of women who are in their late 80s, 90s, and they hold a little bit of resentment because when they were children, their brothers had beautiful bar mitzvahs, and they were denied the chance to have a bat mitzvah." So she said to me, "I want to do something about it." So she offered people, and it ended up being people from every one of our campuses working together. She said, "You have to agree to study with me for a year. We're going to be really serious about this." And Temple Emanuel very graciously gave us the sanctuary for a Saturday afternoon.
It's beautiful.
We had 23 people become B'nai Mitzvah, and
There was no room in the center.
there was no, so what happened was
Beautiful.
Julie and I got there early, and you know how big your sanctuary is, so we put these beautiful ribbons after the 5th row because we didn't want everybody in the back. And then we moved them back, and then we moved them back, and then we had to get the custodial
overflow.
staff to add rows and rows of chairs. People flew in from Israel, from France, from Texas, from all over, and people, this group did the entire service. They led the prayers, they read the Torah, and they all did a Devar Torah. And they're still all meeting as a group, as like, we love each other. Oh, oops, okay,
No, it was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous. Okay, we have time, we have 10 minutes. So a very quick 2 more questions, and then I'm going to take the point in pride of the last question.
And
Lisa.
also, I will stay out there
Great.
as long as people want and answer more questions.
Quick question. As a boomer, I realized, excuse me, we get professionals to help us with everything. And the next generation too. Are there any kind of doulas for senior housing? I can say, I want this, tell me when, figure out what I can afford, evaluate for me, and just do it for me. It's a great opportunity.
Wow.
I don't know of any.
I mean, when my mother moved, I had someone come in and figure out the moves, so.
Yes.
Lisa, loving this job description, a next phase doula. Eileen.
Thank you. So you've done a beautiful job talking about Two Life communities. I know that's where your heart is. Are you able to also talk in a balanced way about other options, Hebrew Senior Life? I know there's also a Newton at Home, La Salle. There are lots of options. So anything you care to share about those would be great.
Absolutely. And I actually worked at Hebrew Senior Life, so I can talk about it with loving kindness as well as my own. So again, Hebrew Senior Life is another nonprofit that's a religious sponsored, so I think that's really good. I will say, and you can call the governor afterwards, she'll tell you the same thing. Nobody has as many services and programs as Two Life because our whole focus is housing. We don't do anything else. But most of the nonprofits are very committed to fulfilling community life. And I'm trying to think, B'nai B'rith has some affordable housing that's lovely. Planning Office of Urban Affairs, which is the Catholic equivalent, has fabulous housing. I'm on the board of the Community Builders. It's a nonprofit that's national. They do some fabulous housing. Mercy Housing, which is it's one of the Protestant denominations. They do some really good housing. So again, with that checklist, there's a lot of really mission-driven nonprofits, and they do a good job. We do a better job, but they do a great job. No, they really do a great job, and I think, I would say, don't ask me, ask other people, because you will get that concept. And I would, with these questions with the checklist. LaSalle and Newbridge, which is, by the way, that's what I did for Hebrew Senior Life. I was the vice president of real estate that developed Newbridge. They are great if you have almost so much money that you don't have to think about money. They are fantastic. When we were planning, we talked about it, like, who is this for? And we actually said, if people are saying, like, how much is this, they're gonna be unhappy because it's so expensive that they're gonna worry, and you don't want people to be worrying all the time. LaSalle is right near Golda. We do some collaborative planning with them. So I just met with their development person, the real estate development person. She told me their new units for a 2-bedroom is an upfront fee of $1.5 million and monthly fee of $13,000 a month. So Opus, LaSalle, that's the new units at LaSalle. I didn't ask her about the old units, just the conversation we were meeting was about new development, so that's just all I found out. So it's, what's that? They're great. And in fact, my inspiration of why I want to do one for the middle income is because when you can do it for people who have that much money that they don't have to worry, you're going to do everything right? You're going to provide as much as you think is the right services because you're not worried about how much it's going to add to the fees. So I said, if that's what happens, and that's what I did at Newbridge, like, okay, let's make this nirvana, let's make this just fantastic. And they said, don't worry about monthly fees, it's okay, you can charge whatever you need to charge. If that's what's right, then we have to find a way to do it for people who don't have that much money. So I would say the high-end things, they're fantastic. And if you can afford them, they're fantastic. They really, really are.
Okay, Bonnie's going to get the last question in here before I take the final.
Thank you. It occurred to me that I don't think we discussed this yet. Do both, say it's a couple that wants to move, do both of them have to pass some kind of health
We don't
test?
do that.
Because some do. LaSalle does.
Yes, the other one, we made a decision not to do that. We
Okay.
welcome everyone. We counsel people about what, if you can't function, then we do say, we want you to get home care because we don't want someone wasting away. But we don't turn anyone away based on health needs. That's a philosophical choice we made.
This is not my final question, this is Bonnie's here. Is there anyone who's not a good candidate who shouldn't go? I think that's part of what you're asking.
That's a really good question. I think if you think the idea of volunteering is burdensome and not interesting to you, you're going to be frustrated with Opus. Now, that's not true for Golda, for Coleman, for Brown House, although I will say the spirit of volunteerism at Golda and Coleman and Brown is quite similar. I really, no, I think only if you don't want to. And can I say one more word about, somebody said something about aging in place, aging at home, and I used to start my speeches by saying, I'm a zealot for aging in community, and then Rabbi Elisa made a whole sermon on the evils of zealotry, and I felt so bad, so I can't say that anymore. But I can say, having 30 years experience in this field personally, and also I'm a nerd, so I track data. The data is so completely clear that I had one other quote. Dr. Stephen Cole from UCLA says, loneliness acts as a fertilizer for other diseases. The biology of loneliness accelerates the buildup of plaque in your arteries. It helps cancer cells grow and spread, and it promotes inflammation in the brain. Philosophically, no one should ever be lonely, and the truth is, and I watched this again with my own mother of blessed memory, longer story for later, after my father died, her life got smaller and smaller because she didn't drive in the snow, she didn't drive in the sleet, then she stopped driving at night, and if it was really a hurricane pouring rain, she wasn't driving in that, and she lived in suburbia, and it is so easy for life to get. And if you live in a community where all it takes is going downstairs and somebody is always there and you always can have a conversation and there's always something to participate in, your life grows at a pace that it just cannot grow if you stay at home. Yes, you can get home care at home. Of course you can. But you can never replace what it's like, someone watching out for you, keeping you in the bridge club, making sure you didn't miss picking up your paper, participating, knitting for homeless shelters.
What we do is the knitting group makes hats and blankets, and I deliver it to the cancer center in New Wellesley Hospital.
And
So many opportunities for meaning.
It's so many opportunities, and I honestly believe there is absolutely no way to achieve that by living in a private home. I just don't think you can.
So last question, you began by asking us our hopes, our fears, our dreams. What do you have as your hopes and fears and dreams that would help you to give us something to walk out with?
Okay. I think I wrote a quote I wanted to share. Yes. In the world we live in this country, in this society we live in, there is an ethos that says we don't need each other. We all pull ourselves up by our own bootstrap. We're all independent and we don't leave each other. And the consequence of that is there is a myth out in the world that aging in place is what we all want to do. And I am determined and really want to get rid of that outdated notion because it has no evidence at all that it creates a good life. Certainly no evidence to create optimal life. And I would love all of you to help me dispel those bad notions. Because we have so many people who come in way later because they say, my children said I should age in place, or I'm an independent woman, I never married, and I'm going to age in place because that's what independent women do. And they're so sorry that they didn't come in earlier. So Bill Thomas, who's my favorite geriatrician, he said, according to the AARP, 90% of Americans want to age in place. This is foolish and unsustainable. We can do better. Aging is and always has been a team sport. The myth of aging in place harms people by defining the decision to share one's daily life with others as failure. Help me get rid of that.
Amen.
Let us thank Amy Schectman, Rabbi Michelle. It has been a wonderful, wonderful evening. I thank you. I invite you all. You have 15 minutes to enjoy refreshments and then come back for
And then
minyan.
come back for minyan.
Yes.